Welcome to Octavia Tried to Tell Us number 21.
21. I know I say this every month, but 21 is a really big number, way longer than we thought we would be doing this
Way
Octavia Tried to Tell Us
longer.
webinar series.
I'm Monica A. Coleman.
And I'm Tananarive Due.
And we are going to have a great conversation today.
You all just don't know. Our guest, this is not her first time with Octavia Tried to Tell Us. This is the first time we've had a guest in for a second time. But
because she's so fire.
She contains multitudes. There's so much. Adrienne Maree Brown will be joining us. I know. Isn't that exciting?
Okay, let's get started.
Yes.
All right, let's see.
Number 21. It looks even more important in Roman numerals.
Doesn't it? Which is why we put it in Roman numerals. So we hope you will be in the chat. We'd love to see you all in the chat, see where you're from. This is our plan for our time together. We'll do some introductions. We'll have the conversations. We got some questions in advance we'll try to ask. Yes. And you can also put some in the chat and we will see if we can get to them.
Don't forget, if you're a social media junkie like I am, in particular, especially on Twitter, use that hashtag Octavia Tried so other people can find the conversation.
It's like we get to have a parallel conversation following the hashtag.
It is. It's so great.
We'd love to see you there as well. And Tananarive may try and check it during the actual program, but if not, we do check it later and join in on the conversation. I am really glad to introduce my friend and colleague, but my friend Tananarive Due. Tananarive Due is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She is an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary, Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror. A leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years, Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award, and her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stephens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She is married to author Stephen Barnes, with whom she collaborates on screenplays. They live with their son Jason and 2 cats.
My co-host, lucky me, is Reverend Dr. Monica A. Coleman, a professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. She's also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and initiate of traditional Yoruba religion. She works at the intersection of faith, culture, and social justice, the author or editor of 6 books and several articles and book chapters that focus on the role of faith in addressing critical social and philosophical issues. Her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, A Womanist Theology, is required reading at colleges and universities around the country. Her memoir, Bipolar Faith, A Black Woman's Journey with Faith and Depression, received the Silver Illumination Award in 2017. Dr. Coleman speaks widely on religious pluralism, religion and mental health, sexual and domestic violence, and navigating change. She lives in a lively intergenerational household where she is an avid vegan cook and cyclist.
And our guest.
Yay. Should we read it together?
Adrienne, we could. How's it going to work?
No, we won't. You can.
I will. Then we'll get started. Adrienne Maree Brown is the writer in residence at the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute and author of Grievers, the first novella in a trilogy on the Black Dawn imprint. We love us a trilogy. Holding Change, the Way of Emergent Strategy Facilitation and Mediation. We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice. Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good. Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. And the co-editor of Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction from Social Justice Movements, and How to Get Stupid White Men Out of Office. She is the co-host of several podcasts, including How to Survive the End of the World and Emergent Strategy podcast. Adrienne has helped to cultivate work and thinking about Octavia Butler and emergent strategy, gathering a loose-knit global network of people interested in reading Octavia's work from a political and strategic framework. This is currently practiced through Octavia Parables, a podcast in which Adrienne and Toshi Reagan read Octavia Butler's work chapter by chapter. Adrienne is also working with a large team to produce a tarot deck honoring Octavia's wisdom. Adrienne is rooted in Detroit. We are excited to welcome for our conversation today, Adrienne Marie Brown.
Yay, welcome, Adrienne.
Welcome.
Hello, Adrienne. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Like, welcome back, Cotter. Welcome back, Adrienne.
I know. Welcome back. It's exciting to be back with y'all.
You are literally the first guest we have invited back for a second time to the Octavia Tried to Tell Us webinar series. Yes.
That feels really special.
And we could do it every month with you, just so you know.
We have a lot to talk about, y'all.
We do.
We have a lot to discuss.
You came on at the beginning, really, of us doing Octavia Tried. And at that time, even the podcast was we are going to, and we have a Twitter account. And everything, I mean, the pandemic lasted so much longer than we thought it would. It still is lasting, just in another iteration.
Yes, it's not over.
Yeah, we totally underestimated some of this for about a month or two.
Oh, yeah.
And we are excited to hear from you because you have been up to a lot in the Octavia world and in the Afrofuturism world.
You absolutely have. And first of all, I have to say, as one of your earlier writing coaches and having had the privilege of working with you, congratulations on the publication of your beautiful novel, Grievers. Which is so well written and so timely.
Thanks. I'm really it's been a really exciting experience having it out in the world. You know, it's a particular vibe, it's a particular feeling that it feels right for right now. Like I feel like I'm in a state of grief all the time. And so getting to talk about a book that is about being in that state is helpful for me. Yeah. And Tananarive, thank you. Like I really deeply credit you, your teaching and your modeling as a writer and your support of the writing community as a large part of how I am doing what I'm doing right now. And, I always think of you whenever I have any idea. I'm like, wait, make a short story first. If you can't make a short story, you don't actually have a novel. Like I'm just like, Tananarive would say, find
my voice is in your head. I've wormed into your head, the voice worm.
What would Tananarive do?
Oh,
what would Tananarive do? She'd say, cut it into a short story.
But you know what?
You got.
I will embrace that, but seeing the work that you've done on Grievers, like long after I saw a manuscript, just blew me away. And I guess, knowing a little bit about the history of that, I want to just launch into like sort of one of the questions for this webinar, because you were here as a guest at the beginning of the pandemic. And I know that the pandemic had an impact on your creative process while you were working on Grievers. So could you talk about that aspect of your pandemic experience?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was invited to send something to Black Dawn. I've been publishing with AK now since 2015, and actually started before that working with them on Octavia's Brood. But 2015 is when that came out, and that was like the first official thing we did together. And even back then, Walida and I were like, maybe we should start an imprint or a series or something, but we were both doing so much, and it was just like, we don't have the capacity to really take this on. And so a few years later, when Charles, my publisher, reached out to me, he was like, we're starting this imprint, and we found this amazing woman, this amazing person, Black queer dominatrix powerhouse, who also edits, who's gonna like hold it down. And what do you think? And I was like, yeah, like I would like to be a part of it. So I sent over Grievers, and I'll say when they said yes, they were, I was like, you can cut this down, because they were like, we want it to be a shorter fiction novella size. So I was like, just take this, you can cut it down. They were like, oh no, this is a novella trilogy. You have the first 2 books of that trilogy here, and then you'll have to write the third. And it's been like being steeped in exactly what is moving in me right now. You know, like as a writer, I am a grieving writer. I've lost people close to me, and then I'm also like a pattern watcher. So there's a pattern of grief moving through me and through all of us right now, and trying to figure out how to put that on the page in Detroit, how to write about a city, how to write about Blackness and what happens, particularly Blackness, inside these moments of crisis.
Erasure,
where,
loss of memory. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like people want us to always just take it, you know, just not mention the inequality or not bring it up, you know. And I think the grievers, writing grievers and feeling like, you know, there's always these social conditions that we need to change. And when we don't change those social conditions, the pileup happens on people who are already oppressed. So we've seen that happening with this pandemic, you know, where it's like, who is struggling, whose businesses are closing, who is not able to find caretakers, not able to find support, who's struggling in those ways. And it's people who've already been dealing with oppression all along, who are like, a $1,200 stimulus check is not going to help my family survive. I don't, who is, you know, so things like that, trying to find ways to be in a dance that is telling a story that is beyond this moment, but also is really fed by the experiences of this time. And, you know, small things like, how does it feel to wear a mask all the time? You know, I didn't actually know that when I first started drafting this book, that was actually that's a big experience. It makes it hard to keep making the right decision.
Yes.
You know, sustaining safety behaviors is like, we all run out of it. We run out of the energy to keep doing it, and that fatigue is real. And it's like, how to write an exciting action-filled book about fatigue and grief and crying. So,
and I've been remiss. I want to interrupt you right there for people who haven't read Grievers yet, and it is fairly new, so it's not your fault. But do go out and read it as soon as you can.
We won't do any spoils.
But it's about a survivor of a pandemic in Detroit, and it's really hard to put the plot into words because this novel is more of an experience.
Yeah.
But it is a profound reading experience, and so applicable to like literally like an ointment that can be applied to today's times. So do run out and get it. And I see your shrine to Octavia behind you.
Oh yes, she's always with
me. I love those.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you know, I always feel like all the Octavia lovers have to like talk to each other. Like, did you see this notebook, girl? Did you see these note cards came out?
Oh,
like, look at this. Isn't that so pretty?
Oh my gosh.
Blackbird letterpress.
Okay.
I know we'll all be like jotting that down.
I know.
We'll put the link in the notes too.
And then I know you guys had Linnell.
Oh, her book is so beautiful.
Oh, such a great book. We had her on the webinar as well.
So,
beautiful book.
You know, I've got the graphic novels. I'm making a mess.
You know, I had an Octavia Butler table when I got married. Instead of doing numbers, we did like writers. And so my cousin who did the art made these little, like the busts of people's heads. Yeah. And so, you know, I still have that. I use them as bookends, right? So
I love that.
I was like trying to pick people's personalities by table. It didn't really match perfectly, but I sure did try to see.
I like that you have a table's worth of Octavia types in your community, in your space.
Yeah, you know. Then I was like, no, you're Langston Hughes people. You're Octavia people, right?
Exactly. Well, and this too. Like, I've been like trying to feel like, who are these kind of people? You know, who are the shapeshifters right now? The wild seed people.
Aren't we all the shapeshifters right now, though?
I think we have to be.
We have to
access that part of ourselves. You know, Wild Seed's protagonist is a shapeshifter named Anyanwu, who's also a healer. Like, she can heal herself by listening. And I feel like that's been the Octavia wisdom that has been the most present with me right now. Is like, my body is so tired in a way that I haven't been. And as far as I know, I haven't had COVID. I have done I've I've done so many tests, so many COVID tests. I've done so much to avoid COVID. I have gotten sick in other ways, but I can feel that exhaustion. And so I'm really trying to be like, okay, Anyanmu myself, like really drop in and see if I can feel for that first pinpoint of discomfort. Like, where is the essence, the center of this unwellness in my system? And I've been learning so much. It's like my thyroid needs a little support, and I need a lot more sleep than, like there's no going back to some normal level of productivity for me. I'm like, that level of productivity was not good for me, actually. And all of this, some of the unwellness is just like recovering from the pace that I was moving at before, and trying to be like, okay, how do I maintain something that is slower and deeper and feels healthier, but doesn't quite line up with what the world expects of me?
Yeah, we've been talking about that and thinking about that a lot. Sometimes just the exhaustion of going out and coming back after just a day out, which would used to be normal. And now you're like, I can't do that anymore.
I was like, I went outside. Oh, no, my friend.
But just the activity,
Exactly.
the people. And I would love for you to talk also about, and I know I've experienced this, because I've also had these in the grieving season, right? Is how grief slows you down. Right? Like, I just feel like it's like everything is in mud, right? Or
exactly.
It's not bad. It just kind of is grief, right?
It's grief. It's total. Yeah. I mean, like, I think of it, I think of grief as love. So I'm like, if you loved people, when you loved people, how you loved people, it really shapes what your grief is going to look like, how it's going to move. And in Grievers, I gave the character Dune, the main character, the pace of grief that I want when I'm grieving, which is she closes the door, she turns off her phone, she really turns inward, and she really is just like, I want to lay in my mom's bed and miss her and seek her smell throughout her house. I want to look at her old clothes and go through her holiday boxes and, just love her. I want to just like be in my mother's house, loving my mom. And it's slow. Like, I kept, even as the writer, I kept being like, okay, now it's time to go find some people, and you see what happens when she starts trying to go find people. It's like it backfires. She no longer really knows how to do it. And that's a huge feeling that I've had, is like, I know that everyone's grieving, but everyone grieves differently. And so I don't really know how to be around other people and their grief with mine. Like I know how to be in my house in this new state where I might be moved to tears at any moment, or where I need to just go spend time with my ancestor altar. I know how to move at that pace when I'm on my own, but going into spaces with others, it's wild. And just not yesterday, but the day before, I got to go be with my friend Michaela Harrison. And she is a whale singer, like a whale whisperer.
I saw your Instagram post.
Yes. Okay. So she has been traveling to Brazil, and she's singing to the whales, and they're singing back. And of course, you can't help but think of Octavia and her dolphin adventures in this, and like needing to listen to other species. But she's doing that. And she played us the recordings of her singing to these whales and them singing back, and it's like the mother and the child, and they're all singing together, and the whales are telling us we are one, and we have to like surrender and rest in it, which also feels like the major lesson of these past 2 years is we are one organism. We cannot be well if half of us are choosing not to practice towards wellness, towards the collective wellness, right? So all of that has been moving in me, that it does take a slowing down if we're going to survive, like slowing down the ways we use fossil fuels, slowing down how quickly we come into contact with each other, slowing down and observing each other's wellness. I know so much more about people's health these days. I'm like, do you have an autoimmune disorder? Like, I need to know that. So that I can protect you, and or are you ever around unvaccinated people? I need to know that so I can protect them, or whatever it is. So yeah, there's this great slowing down and attending to
And attending too. I was just reading also on Twitter how a group of friends has kind of normalized the COVID testing before they get together in person. It's not that if you can find a test and afford a test, you know, they should be free, but it's not that hard. They're not comfortable, but it's not that hard to do a COVID test before you go see a friend or an older relative, you know, and I love that people are having the courage to ask for what they need.
Absolutely.
Which is something the pandemic is teaching us.
Absolutely. There's so many questions, like so many spaces not to make assumptions. You know, with my partner, we keep having these moments where we're like, oh, did you ask them? You know, and it's like, oh, no, I just made an assumption because this is my friend. And so even having to have those moments where it's like, wait, we're friends and I still want to be able to ask, when were you last tested? What's your exposure? What's your risk factor? Like those kind of things matter. And, you know, it's kind of like the same quality of conversation that we have with sexual partners. It's like, we're all intimate in these ways that if, you know, when you move out of your home into any other space, you're in a negotiation with other people. And even at the door, you know, I'll notice that, like I'll order something and the person's coming to the door. I'm like, okay, you put it down and then you walk away.
Now back away.
The blinds. That's me.
Back away. I'm telling you with my eyeballs. All right. Yes. So, you know, all that like nonverbal cues and negotiations and so much is going on, you know, but all of that slows down the social experiment.
Right. I mean, we've talked a lot about that, right? On Octavia Tried, it comes up a lot about voice and boundaries.
Yes.
Right. And how we now have to use them in different ways. And probably these are all good lessons in lots of ways to come out using our voice more, especially when, right, if you're covered here, we realize how much of those nonverbal expressions we're losing. Like, I was like smiling and nodding at them anymore. You know, like I said, usually nod, like my little smile doesn't mean anything.
No.
So you cannot tell that I'm smiling or smirking or snarky or any of it. It's just sort of
sometimes it's great, but usually when you want someone to see you smile.
Right. You forget that you're trying to
and
spread
it's such a beautiful
feeling.
thing when you see a smile. Like when you do, you know, get that with my friends, we do like the PCR. It's like, okay, PCR test. And then we do a rapid test when we're around each other. And this is the other thing, you know, like I wish that so many things are different, but one thing is in Germany, you can buy the at-home tests in bulk so much more affordably. And so then, you know, you can just have what you need. It never ceases to astound me how hard it is for us to have basic things that we need.
In the United States, as boastful as we've been and continue to be, when you look at the reality that we have so little to be boasting about when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to community. Oh my goodness.
It's really a community.
That's what it is.
Oh, and you know, we have a great question someone sent in for you about community. It's a little off topic, but I think it's really kind of close to what we've been talking about just now. And it says, how do you think about inclusion or exclusion of people from your circle or community that think they're helping, but they're ultimately a threat to collective goals?
I'm sure you've never had this experience, Adrienne.
Not just you want to have, but how do we deal with people who aren't really helping the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's layers to this one. So I think a few things. One is it helps to have a clear definition of what that community is for, gathered around. What are the shared values? What is the shared purpose?
Like Lauren Olamina.
It's like you come together and we are trying to survive and we have a destiny to get off this planet. You know, I'm like, okay, are you about that life? You know, or are you, you know, if your goal is actually instead to deeply, deeply garden and plant and handle the earth, that might not actually align with where we're trying to go. And I find that happens a lot of times in groups where they're like, there's some things that really work for me here, but the core destiny we're actually not aligned on. So I think finding out that alignment and giving people the option to be, if you're not on an alignment, then you should go find a group where you are. Where is your political home? Where is that place that's actually going to nourish you? And if someone continues to is truly a threat to the group, that their behaviors, their actions keep be out of alignment with what the group is trying to do and even causing harm. There's this quote from Prentice Hemphill that I love. I think I say every day, which is, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself simultaneously. And I think we need good boundaries. We need to be able to say, no, that actually doesn't work here. And I like boundaries of behavior rather than boundaries around like certain kinds of people. It's really about certain kinds of behavior, because behavior is a choice. People can opt in and say, this is how I'm going to behave in this space. If you tell me that we don't do a bunch of shady, petty drama, and that's not welcome in the space, and I keep bringing the drama, then I'm going to know that I'm going to be invited elsewhere. So I think of those. And then I think in Holding Change, which is the book I put out earlier this year on facilitation, there's this whole section on problem participants, right? Like folks who keep just throwing a wrench in the gears as you're trying to move stuff forward. And you want to really assess sometimes that person who seems to be slowing things down or seems to be complaining is actually bringing up something that is important for the group. They may just be the curmudgeon of the group, or, someone who's like, the way I care shows up in a pessimism. So it's really also checking for that. Like, it's like, don't push the person out because they're pointing out that this group has a lot of internalized patriarchy, like maybe address the internalized patriarchy, or like really notice. Like I have some very wonderful people in my life who are very, who seem very at odds with things generally, but they still bring a lot to the table, and their critiques can be good ones. So I think it's assessing, is this critique that actually can nourish the community? Or is this someone who doesn't want the community to be nourished? Right?
And learning to tell the difference, and
really being able to discern, like what are you here for?
And not judging the value of the contribution based on the way it's shared. Like we were watching Night of the Living Dead last night, in a weird example. And I've heard that George A. Romero made those zombies such slow shamblers. Daniel Krauss, one of his later collaborators, told me that he intentionally made them such slow shamblers to show that if we had only been able to come together as a community, meaning that house, a Black man, an older white man who represents the system and patriarchy, the hippie, the sort of 70s counterculture. Like if everyone in that group had just been able to get their act together, there's no way they shouldn't have been able to protect themselves from a bunch of slow-moving shamblers. And there were no binaries. The right answer was to do both things. But it was actually such a back and forth that everyone died.
Tananarive, I really love this, because I feel like that is, when I think about our climate crisis right now, I think of it like that. Like, I'm like, it's a slow apocalypse. It's a slow disaster.
Yes.
And this is why I always love Octavia's work, because I feel like she writes about the slow disaster really well. But it's like, that's what we're living in, is these slow disasters where it's like, we can see what's going on, and we actually have the time to make different choices that lead to different results. And it is a lot of both and. We have to both be globally connected to others and deeply locally rooted. And we have to figure out how to communicate and share our resources while also getting used to just being in relationship with our local cycle of resources. All those things. I'm like, there's that concurrence too there. I love that, actually, because it's like, is the will. It's not
and overcoming the personalities, and as Octavia wrote about so often, the hierarchies.
Oh yeah.
So devastating. Wow. Speaking of Octavia, I just know in my heart Octavia would have loved this novel, Grievers, and really everything about you. But also, I'm just wondering, like, in what ways, specifically in this, not post-pandemic, but new pandemic, post-vaccine pandemic.
Pandemic 2.0.
Right. Is
2.2.
Octavia continuing to guide and inform? Because nothing that is happening right now would have surprised her.
No. I feel like there's a few things. One is I feel like Octavia is always giving me permission to move towards other survivors, other people who are interested in moving forward and figuring that out, and understanding that that's not necessarily everyone. Like, everyone is not looking at this moment and being like, oh, we have to think about our long-term survival. You know, a lot of people are just like, all right, well, it is what it is. I'm not going to wear this, you know, I'm not going to change. And then there's other folks who are like, actually, I'm interested. What are the changes? And, you know, how do I begin to make them? So I've been really paying attention, like in my household, you know, like how can I get aligned with the future in my household, in my relationships,
Yes.
in the relationships I have with children around me, how I'm deepening my ancestor practice a lot. And I see her inside of that practice, you know, not necessarily directly. Like, I don't think Octavia is a spirit who would just sit around waiting for requests. But I do think that, you know, drawing on her legacy of rigor, I feel that in this moment, that it's like, where is the rigor in this moment? Where is the surrender in this moment? How can I stop resisting the fact that everything is changing? And even the things I don't want to change are changing, and that is a divine force at work. And how can I surrender and shape that? I think about probably every day. I think about that. Okay, this is not where I wanted things to necessarily be today, but here we are. You know, and this is what's changing. Toshi Regan and I this season are doing this deep dive into Wild Seed, and it's the beginning of, you know, it's the beginning of the Patternist series. Yeah. And so it's really got me thinking about, like, what are the patterns of this time and what is still wild in us? Like, what is still, you know, uncolonized, decolonized, post-colonized, pre-colonized, you know, like, what is still truly wild in each of us? And I've just been thinking about that a lot, that I'm like, there's a worldview in which it's too late. And then there's a worldview in which it's like, this is the time that it is now, and it'll keep changing. And I feel like I'm in that latter place where I'm like, it's not too late, but we can't look at it from a European worldview, from a Western standpoint. I keep repeating this because I just received this piece of wisdom that was like, oh, that really feels appropriate for this moment. I was told that there was this Ojibwe ancestor named Walter Brissett, and he said the most European thing is to think that there's one way to do everything. There's one solution for everything. And so I've been like, okay, in that decolonized or uncolonized, like that wild part of ourselves, we know that there's a distinct way to do everything, and that each of us is a distinction. And so I've really been leaning into that. It's like, what is the distinction of me, of Adrienne, and what I'm offering into the world? And where do I start to feel scared that I won't belong, or scared that I won't be protected, or, you know, scared that there's not going to be enough? You know, where does the scarcity come in? And how do I take a deep breath and be like, there's still enough, though. There's enough for me to be my distinct self. And I think being in that practice for me feels very Octavian, you know, just being like, well, you know, I don't fit into the boxes. The older I get, the less boxable I am. And that's just great.
Yeah.
Definitely feel you on that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you about preparedness, right? I mean, one thing that we got from Parable, of course, was this go bag, right? Be like,
yes,
she's ready, right? Lauren's ready. And many of Octavia's characters are. It's like they know something is coming and they're ready. And I think of how that connects with grief. Because so much of grief is like, I'm not ready, right? Like, even if you know loss is coming, you're like, I'm not ready. And I know I am beginning to get to the age where my teachers and mentors and elders are just aging, right? Like nothing is necessarily wrong. They're just they're just of the age where they're getting ready to transition to the ancestors.
I just lost a teacher, so absolutely,
right.
yes.
You know, and even if intellectually, you know, like this is what happens. Like there's a hard part that's like, I'm not ready, right?
That's
So
right.
like, how does one prepare? Or do you have any insights about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the grief go bag, right? Or the grief stay
Oh,
home
I
bag,
like
maybe.
that
What a
question.
beautiful question,
Yeah.
Monica.
Right?
Wow,
I
I
love
like that.
that.
So
It's
this
the
is
grief
all
go
personal
bag.
information I need.
You're like,
Yeah,
but actually, what's the answer? So,
yeah.
I mean,
So the
I
grief
will
go bag, the grief
say
stay home bag, right? Maybe.
I have all of these bags. You know, I'm like, I literally have these bags, girl. So, you know, I have my Octavia Butler go bag that, you know, has like all my paperwork in there and like, you know, my towel and like all the stuff she said in the list that we're supposed to have in that bag. I have one of those. But the grief go bag has actually been really powerful for me. What I find I go to is I need a little candle. I need something that I can burn so that I can offer up a prayer, offer up my gratitude for the life that was lived. And I really am, and this doesn't work all the time, but I really am trying to pivot how I think about death so that my orientation is that whatever that person has gone on to is the next part of an adventure for them, right? And it might be a deep rest adventure. It might be a deep pleasure adventure. It might be a deep familial adventure. But their spirit gets to go on to some adventure, and then it's good news, you know, that I don't have to think of death as a sad or a bad thing. You know, this is a hard world where suffering is guaranteed. And we don't know what is beyond this, but I like the idea that it's a place where suffering is not necessarily necessary.
Even if it's only rest, you know,
right?
and it could
Even
be
if it's
so
just
much
rest,
more.
which,
Yeah.
you know, I love that idea. But then I feel activity from my ancestors in a way that makes me think, even if it's rest mostly, there's still some
there's something going on.
engagement. Because I was like, why are you still up in here? Like,
but it's not like it's not stressful. They're not on a timetable, right?
No, exactly.
Right.
I'm just like, so you just showed up right now and wanted to give me a visitation or whatever. I mean, I have active and involved ancestors. And so part of that grief go bag for me is like the quicker I can realize like the grief I'm going through is mine. And it's because I loved this person.
Yes.
What a gift that I did not somehow slip through life without getting caught up in love. You know, I didn't miss it. I got grabbed many times. I have so many hooks in me, you know, and I keep feeling them, you know, as they release and certain, you know, I also know that there's different formulas for how grief shows up. So if someone is older, they've lived a long life, I can see that they've done what they were here to do. It's so much easier for me to move into the grief process. You know, I'm just like, yes, celebrate your life. That was great. And what I'm trying to do is have that same sense of completion, even for those who die much younger.
Yes, that's hard.
You know, to have that same sense of like, well, that was your whole life. And now you're off on a new adventure. And I'm sad because I expected more time with you. And that's reasonable. That's totally reasonable because I really loved you. So, you know, I'm sitting with those kind of things. For me, I burn a candle. I pull a tarot card when I want to talk to a particular ancestor. And I'm just like, anything you want to offer me that would help here. And then we talked about slowing down earlier, but I really find I have to just have a much more spacious schedule. I can't, like I used to just run from thing to thing, but now it's like I feel so much more in each thing, you know, because like any conversation that I have these days, almost any conversation I have, we're talking about grief in some way, you know, like either one of us has just lost someone or there's a social loss happening, or, you know, we have to acknowledge like, oh, I haven't seen you in 2 years, you know, and you're my closest friend, you know, like, and there's a grief. You know, there's the grief of lives that we've lost, but there's also the grief of like the lives we were meant to live over this past 2 years and the deferral of those things. And you know, we may never go back to some of those plans, you know, like, I mean, I'm just so, there's just so many things that I'm like, I can still sense that other parallel life. that was going to be unfolding during this time. What's the other piece? Gratitude feels like it's a big part of what's in my go bag for grief as well. That a gratitude for the life I still have to live. A gratitude that I got to spend time with that person. A gratitude, like I try to remember I try to like write down all the memories I have with that person, because in that moment of grief, it's like they all come flooding in. Like when did I last see them? When did I first see them? Like all the stories I can remember.
Right.
So offering gratitude that you got to experience as much as you did.
Yes, and alongside gratitude, I think self-forgiveness is such an important component, because so often the first thing we want to pivot to is how we failed that person we lost somehow. I'm constantly thinking of the times my mother wanted to scratch my scalp with a comb, and after a certain age, I was like, "Mom, no, I don't want to do that." And I think about it so often. Would it have killed you? But when we're in life and in life experience with people, there are times that it's okay for us to set our personal boundaries. It's not an excuse. And it's a kind of a selfish impulse too, because it's sort of flushing away the gratitude piece for the things we did do and the times we did share, and making it a more self-centered feeling. Like, I should have done this. I should have done that. And I think it stands in the way of a healing process when we just fill ourselves with just self-critique about how we were or weren't when we were with that loved one.
Well, and there's such a desire, as if we can, by going back, change something. One of the things I feel like I've learned from losing people is I'm good with people. Right? Like they know that I love them.
Yes.
Even they know where we stand. Even if we haven't seen each other. I have a friend, a beloved friend, who's just kind of ghosted me and everyone else in their lives. And I'm just like, I love you. That's all I have to say about it. I feel all kinds of things. I miss you, but you know that I love you. And that's all you need to know. And if I love somebody, I feel good about where I am with that I'm like, there was a time in my life when there were people where I was like, oh, I hope nothing happens to them before we make up, but I don't feel that way now. Like, I feel like that piece, because I was like, I have to proactively go about this, because I can't handle the feeling of like, oh shit, I meant to call them. I meant to do this. I needed to clear something. But there's also something around closure, that self-forgiveness, the stories, the gratitude, and then the closure of something, being able to say like, we don't die with a bunch of ribbons all handled like so,
No, we do not.
Right. So I think of it as the kind of closure that happens when a tributary moves into a larger body of water, where it's like that tributary, it's not like it's done. It just, we've reached the end of it being distinct in that way. And now it's inside of a larger container,
So
and that's the same with the life. It's like my life as my distinct Adrienne Marie Brown life is a temporary tributary. And I'm flowing my best, but I will eventually flow back into something greater than myself. And it helps to know that I'm like, that's where I came from, and that's where I will go. That's where we all come from, and that's where we all go. And the rest is mysterious. I think, thank goodness it's mysterious. I think it gives us something to continuously wonder about for our whole lives. I love that like so much of human life is spent trying to build structures around our different imaginations of what is in that beyond space. And this period has left me with a lot of interest in being present. Like I've been a futurist my whole adult life, and lately I've been saying, I think I'm becoming a nowist. Like I'm really, really interested in like, how do I feel right now, and how much can I feel right now? And like, it's changing my life, you know, being in love with someone and being like, oh, like I'm not in my memory of you or in my projection of what may happen, but right now I'm in love with you. Like in this moment, it's so enlivening. And in this moment, we have what we need. And, you know, it may not be the most, but it's just right. You know, there's something about in the now, things are generally good. And if they're not good, what needs to shift is clear, you know? So yeah, I've been really tuning in through meditation, but also just like in every moment, that mindfulness of like, bring myself into this moment, what's possible here.
And I think what's so powerful about what you're saying is that we've lost a lot of our rituals for grief, right?
Yes.
Because, or, you know, and those are the things that help us to manage grief, right? In terms of being able to do funerals, memorial services, all different kinds of rituals, because it's not safe, or even doing them in these truncated forms, it doesn't quite get to what you want to do,
virtual memorial.
Right, virtual. It's like, it does something, but it doesn't, like, you're not hugging your cousin, right? You know,
That's right.
which is what you might need. And
That's
so
right.
I appreciate that a lot of what you're saying is like, well, this is how we do, this is how we can do grief when it's more solitary, right? We can change how we're thinking about it, you know, until we get back to or recreate, right? Certain rituals.
Yeah, but and I also think that part of recreating new rituals, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but like that, I had a ritual pretty established before the pandemic started, like that my ancestor altar is right over here. They're just always hanging out over there. And it's like all my homies. But when someone passes, I go and light a candle and introduce them to the rest of the ancestors. So I'm just like, y'all look out for this person and they're going to come looking for y'all. And I don't know how it all works, but just, you know, y'all figure it out because you're in the ancestral realm. But like, I know that there's a sense of completion that comes from me with that, where I'm like, okay, I am acknowledging that this has happened, like letting the reality land in me. And then my grief can really get going, you know, as long as I haven't acknowledged that I'm like, you are in a different realm and I'm not going to get to see your body, you know, because I grew up in that Southern Baptist tradition where you come and everybody sees the body first. You come to the wake or you come by the house to repast. You come
and you bring some, you drop off food and you come.
You bring food, you see the body, you know for sure that that person is no longer in that body, and you close the casket ceremonially together. And you know, now it's like, okay, that's not possible. We have to have faith. We have to just believe. We have to decide within ourselves on our own, this is true. This person is gone. And so the lighting of the candle for me, I have really relied on that as a way of being like, this is how I see the body, and the body blows out, you know. That has helped me a lot.
That is beautiful. And movement away from denial, both in terms of accepting that someone is no longer in the form, you know, in which we knew them, but also in that daily mindfulness, which when you sit in mindfulness, you ask yourself the question, I really miss so-and-so. I haven't talked to them in a while. Let me go talk to that person. And the understanding that this is a temporary state, not having denial about that, enables us to take the steps so that we do feel clean at the time of grief, right? Where we did think to talk to them, maybe it was 2 months ago, but you know, it's just to remove all those barriers to healing. To honoring the love. And I love you putting it that way, the love that grief actually represents. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and honoring the time, I think that's the other piece is, you know, with each passing life, it becomes clearer to me that I'm not going to get to do every single thing I thought I was going to get to do. And I'm not going to get to be in a deep relationship with every single person that I maybe want to. And it's really helping me to work with some discernment of like, okay, like I'm not chasing after anyone to make them be close to me or be my friend or, you know, and I'm not letting anyone chase after me. Like I'm clear, like I'm either your friend or I don't have time for that, you know, and we can be friends, you know, like if I don't know, but I just feel like my 20s particularly, I felt like there was so much like chasing each other and trying to figure out what was going on. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. It has to be clear. You
Yeah,
know, you
chasing
either
Yeah.
all in for me being exactly as I am right now, and this is the kind of friendship I can offer, and is that good? Okay, cool. And you know, I have found that I'm like, I need to be able to be reliant on my spirit, and I need to be with people who are reliant on their spirits, who are not coming to me for something more than they are getting fed by their own spirit, you know. And that kind of, you know, Octavia also wrote a vampire novel. I think of that as kind of vampire energy vampire, you know, where people come and they're just like, I'm pulling, but I'm not giving back anything.
Giving back. Yeah.
You know about them African immortals. So, you know, I'm like, gotta be, right? Like, I just feel like for me, I've been really paying attention to like, where does it feel like there's a mutuality of energy? There's no struggle, there's no obligation or guiltiness inside of the relationship. And I'm like, if I only have a temporary amount of time, and I trust that that is true, then I want to make sure I'm spending it well with people who I don't have to fight them for good attention, and they don't have to fight me for it. It's so that feels like a big lesson from grief.
Well, you know, this really makes me think about legacy, right? Because you began this conversation in a way, this last thought, right? Talking about you can't do everything in one temporal life. And I once had a teacher, he's still alive, but he's retired, who said to me, you know, as a teacher, you have these ideas and you have all these things you want to do and you can't do them all. And, you know, you have students and they take up these ideas and do it better than you could have, right? Or differently than you could have. And he was saying that about this work I was stumbling to work on, which felt really good because he was a really bright and harsh teacher. And that made me think about not just how creative people do that in their writing, right? But also how Octavia is doing that for you. And wanted to see if you could take a little time to talk to us about Octavia parables, right? And how, you know, you experience in your life your way of leaving a legacy as well as the way in which, you know, her life felt cut short too early to all of us, I'm sure. And probably even to herself, right? But it's living on, right? In ways, I mean, who could have ever imagined?
I mean, I love
screen up here.
Oh, yay. Hi. Well, yeah, like, isn't it so pretty? We had this beautiful team called And Also Too, and they worked with art from Krista Franklin. This is a piece of Krista Franklin's art that they helped us imbue into a whole website, readingoctavia.com. But, you know, basically Toshi, Regan, and I started out with this podcast where we were going chapter by chapter, first through the parables. So we went through the parable of the sower, parable of the talents, and now we're in Wild Seed. And we're planning to do the whole pattern series and then Xenogenesis. And you know, we're just like, this feels useful. Like reading Octavia together feels really useful. And we're getting a lot of feedback that other people are like reading her because we keep lifting her up, you know, and I think y'all know how important this is, right? That it's like, I think about all the Black women whose work needs to be archived, studied, uplifted, like taken as a serious place of scholarship. So I think, you know, and I find I'm deeply moved when I see this in other Black scholars, that we all need to have lineage ancestors, you know, ancestors of our work lineage, ancestors of our inspiration lineage, you know. So I see people where I'm like, oh, you on that James Baldwin line, you over there on that Jim Jordan line, I see you over here on that Toni Morrison line. And then, you know, there's some Audre Lorde lineage over here, and there's some Malcolm X lineage. And it's beautiful. It's just like picking up the work intentionally. You know, my friend Adaku Uta runs Harriet's Apothecary, and she says straight up, she's like, I partnered with Harriet Tubman in order to create this healing space. And it's like, I love that idea of recognizing like there were these lives that were lived. We got snippets of them. We got what they chose to give us, what they chose to create, you know, what they chose to share. And so part of our job is to keep that and take it seriously, which is, I think, what we do with Octavia's parables is we read And each chapter, Toshi basically does the summary of the chapter, and then I talk about what are the questions that come up that we need to sit with for ourselves. It's like kind of a, self-study. It can be studied in a group as well. And we're learning a ton. And as we're learning, I'm like, Octavia really studied.
Oh, yes.
She really read the news. She really studied. She really was like, I want to understand humans. I really want to understand. I don't get us. And I really appreciate that, because I feel like I've been hopeful my whole life, but also brokenhearted by what humans do over and over. And so there's something for me about reading Octavia where she also had that brokenheartedness and that sense of destiny. And that's why she really, to me, I'm like, this is a nourishing, even, the wild seed, what we're reading right now is like, this is a person who is enslaved, really. And it takes a while to even recognize that, because she's such a powerful woman. But that's the Black story, is we're such a powerful people, and we have not been in our full power here. And how do we reckon with that and still let our magic be present? So yeah, we've been in deep scholarship and having a blast.
Beautiful. Beautiful. What a gift to yourselves and to all of us as listeners. So that's great.
Well, I have to shout y'all out, because I really do feel like between the Parables podcast and this webinar series and, what John Jennings and Damian Duffy have been doing with the graphic novels, and like what Ayana and Moya have been doing with the Legacy Network, and, Walida, everyone, it just feels like there's this swelling up in Octavia's name that is right on time and that is deeply of service. And it just makes me, I'm so excited that she hit the New York Times bestseller list.
I know.
So excited that everyone's making film and TV projects out of her work. Like, I feel like, we can hold each other's hands. Like we did okay over here in this work. So,
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, for the wisdom you always give. I'm like, I'm going to go back and take notes and
I know,
put my
right?
grief go bag together.
Yeah, get your grief go bag. That was your idea. I love it.
The grief grow bag. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But
Thank you so much for having me,
Adrienne, and be well. As always, it's a joy just to hear how you think and walk in the world. And thank you for joining us for a second time on Octavia Tried to Tell Us.
Thanks
or so she said.
Back.
Octavia told us.
Octavia told us. We tried to listen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't Adrienne amazing?
That was so powerful on so many levels.
You might have caught us wiping our eyes a couple times.
I know. I'm going to be thinking about that conversation for days to come. And it's kind of ironic because it was such a profound conversation that it makes it even a little more difficult to announce what we have to announce next in terms of this webinar.
Well, this was really created in the beginning, which felt like the height, but I don't know if we can call it the height of this pandemic. We were all at home. We, except for our, the workers who had, our critical workers who had to be out. A lot of things were canceled. And there was so much uncertainty and struggle.
Yes.
Not that all the uncertainty and struggle has left, because it hasn't.
No.
And as you know, this was a text message exchange between Tananarive and I, like, hey, let's talk about Octavia Butler, because it seems like we live in the parable days.
And sure enough,
yes, go ahead.
Month by month, so many of you have joined us for these healing and sustaining conversations about survival, preparedness, community, the future, just so many topics, and it's been so special for us.
And we very much were happy to do it. It was nourishing for us. We said we would do it as long as we were having fun and enjoying it. And we still are, which is why we're still doing it. We've got to have conversations with some of the most amazing people who also love Octavia Butler's work, and they've brought so much insight to us, not just about Octavia and her work, but about our lives and about survival and creativity in the times that we're living in. And even, right, most recently, ways for us to think about and live with and through grief. So you're right. But we've also noticed things have changed. And now we're no longer just struggling to get through the pandemic, but we're trying to think about how we all are going to live in this new normal. It's not, we won't say the pandemic is over because it's so not over.
It's not
but it's
over.
Changing and evolving and unfolding. And they're new and different things to consider. And so for those reasons, and because of just our own, literally our personal energy levels, this is one of the last of the Octavia Tried to Tell Us webinars.
Yes, we will be wrapping up soon after the new year. Our last webinar will be in January of 2022, sort of setting the stage for the new year. They will continue in some form, less frequently than monthly, and we will be absolutely sure to send out the word over social media the next time we do one, but we just won't be able to keep up the monthly format.
You can find information about them at octaviatried.com. We'll make sure you can see that as well. When we do the recording, we'll run a little something under the bottom to let you know that you can also find us at octaviatried.com. Some information about it, about all of the guests that we've had, another place to find some of the recordings if you've missed them or want to go back or use them or teach them or cite from them. We won't just, leave the internet ether, but This is going to be one of our last things.
And we just wanted to let you know. So tell your friends to come to the next two, especially.
Now, as some of you may know, we ended up having a kind of spin-off community of people who wanted more community, who were feeling very isolated, who needed some energy for creativity. And we have had this beautiful, amazing Shaping Change community for many, many months as well, where we have gotten to know each other. It's had much more interaction than we're able to provide for the larger forums like Octavia Tried here. And one thing we decided to do as we are kind of wrapping up Octavia Tried to Tell Us was to share with you some of the resources that we have found beneficial and helpful in that community. And so we want to tell you how you can just kind of grab those resources, not join the community because the community is going to wrap down as well, but how you can access some of the things that we have found to be the most really nourishing and exciting for us as well.
And our members as well. So it's called the Shaping Change Bundle. And it's you get a recording of an unpublished interview with Octavia Butler. That was me and my husband, Stephen Barnes. We had a great conversation with Octavia a few years before she died. The 7 steps of Octavia's method of shaping change. The Shaping Change e-journal for daily reflection, so important in terms of really putting yourself first and figuring out what you want to do that day, who you can reach out to that day, how you can have an impact that day. The Shaping Change Creativity Spark of guided writing prompts.
And we are excited to be able to offer that to you. We've tried to put it at a pretty low price so you can just grab it. It's a digital product. You can access it, download it, print it off if you're a print off person. And you can find this at shapingchange.co. shapingchange.co.
It's like a little go bag, a little Octavia go bag, right?
It's like your Octavia Tried go bag.
Exactly.
You don't have the webinars, your digital, that's such a great way of putting it. Your Octavia Tried to Tell Us go bag. Well, as always, we thank you for being with us, for the time that you have given to us, not just today, but in the last many, many months, like really almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Pandemic.
Who would have thought? But here we are, and we're all still here, and we're all for today together. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.
We will see you next month.